Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is the day the Lord has made, and we are rejoicing. We are glad in it. We thank God for each and every one of you as we say good morning to each and every one of you. Say a specific good morning to my mom. Good morning, love you. Good morning to Sister Strand, Manifestation Monday. Good morning. She sends morning greetings. Good morning to Sister Portia. Sister Brenda, Miss Conaway, Brother Mike, good morning. Reverend Jackie, good morning. Sister Pearl, Miss Pearl, good morning. Miss Carlene, good morning. And Miss Ross, good morning to each and every one of you. Today we will be spending some time with First Peter. In fact, I think the next couple of days we will be spending some time with First Peter. First Peter's letter, his epistle to those who have been dispersed in early Christendom. He's writing to them, those who have been suffering, those who are being persecuted. In part, good morning to our Facebook users. In part, they are being persecuted. Good morning, Ms. Randolph. They're being persecuted. They're suffering because of the fact that they're no longer following the pagan ritual, religious traditions and rituals. They are no longer following pagan traditions and rituals. They are no longer a part of the pagan religious system. And as a result, they are being persecuted. Not only that, but they are visitors, they are sojourners in particular lands. And because they are no longer practicing pagan religion, they are being blamed for everything that goes wrong in that society because they're not following the pagan gods who are over control over the economics, the God who's over control over the weather, whatever the case may be. And so anything that goes wrong in that particular area, that particular city, that particular town, that hamlet, that region, the Christians are being blamed for because they no longer follow the pagan religious rituals and systems. And on top of that, now they are being persecuted. They are now suffering. And so in light of that, Peter is trying to, or whoever's writing in Peter's name, is seeking to remind them of their salvation. That just because we are going through it does not mean we are not saved. Just because we are having difficult moments and seasons does not mean that God does not love us. Does not mean that our lives and our living is in vain. It just simply means that we are living a human experience, and in a human experience, we all go through some things. We all go through suffering and pain, and so that is what we're going to be dealing with today. I dealt with some of this yesterday out of Lamentations, where the writer says that it was good. It's for my good that I went through this. And so simple. And so Peter today is a different, nuanced way of understanding this suffering that comes in our lives. And he's helping us to understand that salvation does not exclude us from suffering, nor does suffering tarnish our salvation. Salvation does not exclude us from going through it. But also when we go through it, it does not tarnish, it does not inhibit our salvation. Our salvation is sure as far as First Peter is concerned. And so let's go ahead and work through these verses. I think I'm going to do just the first 12. I don't know, we'll see. But we're going to work through those verses this morning, beginning really in verse 3 rather. We could go back to verse 1, but that's just telling us who he's writing to, the pilgrims of dispersion. He's reminding us that they have been scattered because of persecution, but he says elect. They are the elect according to the foreknowledge of God the Father. And so that foreknowledge means that God loves them. God still loves that. Don't think because you're going through it that God doesn't love you. That's what he's saying. You're dispersed, but God foreknew you. He loved you. This foreknowledge of God. He loves you, and there's sanctification of the Spirit for obedience and sprinkling of the blood of Christ. And he gives us kind of the formula for this salvation, for this what he would call heavenly inheritance. And so that's what we're going to work through. So beginning at verse 3, he says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time." Want us to see in verses 2 through 4 that Peter reveals to us four discoveries, if you will, that we make about God's glory. The first thing he says is that we were born for glory. He says that in verse 2. By the time he gets to verse 3, he says, "Blessed be God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ." We are experiencing a living hope. This is a hope that helps us to get through these difficult moments. It's a hope that is looking toward a future beyond the suffering. It is really literally a word of encouragement. Peter is seeking to encourage those who are being persecuted because of their faith, that there is hope beyond this situation, beyond this circumstance, beyond this moment. And he says it in this way, according to his abundant mercy, that God extends to us um, um, abundant, overwhelming mercy, that our salvation is grounded in God's mercy, his acts of compassion toward you and I, despite our condition. Watch this, not only our condition of suffering, but watch this, also our condition of sinfulness. That God extended mercy to you and I. He calls it an abundant mercy. And then he says, has begotten us again. God has given us a new life. When we talk about a new life and a new walk, and a new talk, that is where we get this kind of language from, that God, according to his abundant mercy, has begotten. That word begotten means to give life to. And he's done it again. Not only did we have a physical rebirth, a physical birth rather, but we've had a spiritual rebirth. God has, in his mercy, given us new life. And so now we are to walk in the newness of life. And that is what Peter is encouraging these dispersed members of these communities, that we are to walk in the newness of life. God has enabled us to live in an entirely different dimension than from our physical birth. There's a newness of life. There's an expansion, if you will, of consciousness and awareness when we are born again. We are begotten again, and we have to remember we are born from above. How can I enter my mother? You cannot enter the womb again. So you cannot be born again in that way. You have to be born from above. You have to be born. God has to do that work, and so He's saying, God in His mercy, even despite our suffering, despite our sinfulness, God has given us new life. And then watch what he says. That new life is a living hope. He has begotten us again to a living hope. Hope here does not imply a wishfulness, but rather a dynamic confidence that does not end with life, but continues through eternity. A living hope. It is dynamic. When you have this kind of hope, it helps you. It helps you to navigate life when you have a living hope. And watch this. How do we have this living hope? Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So watch this. If God had power enough to get Jesus up from the dead, then certainly God has enough power to get us through what we're going through. Certainly God has enough power to give us hope for our future, and not only the future of this life, but the future of the life that is to come. If God could do that through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, then certainly he can give us a living hope. But not only does he give us a living hope. Good morning, Brother Parker, Sister Webster. Good morning, Sister Karen, Miss Sales. Good morning, Sister Webster. Not only does he give us a living hope, but watch this. He gives us the promise of an inheritance that's incorruptible. This inheritance reminds us and refers to the hope that's mentioned in verse 3. It emphasizes the lasting nature of this inheritance. Right? Lasting inheritance would have comforted his audience as they suffered displacement and experienced uncertainty about the future. I want y'all to think about this thing. Not only are they being persecuted, y'all, but y'all got to remember they've been displaced. And I don't know if we really get it unless you've been through this, the trauma of being displaced. Can you imagine? Let me just bring it home and bring it closer to home. Can you imagine the trauma that is being felt by those in Creighton Court, who used to live in Creighton Court, those who are living in these communities that they are now talking about tearing down? And we know what they're going to do. They're going to build houses, and they're going to build condos and apartments and stuff that they're not able to afford. And so what happens is essentially what you do then is you displace those people. You displace them. You take them out of their homes and you displace them. And there's a trauma that happens when you do that. And that trauma, what we're finding, because we found this out in post-traumatic slavery disorder, or post-slavery traumatic disorder, is what we're learning is that the same thing happened to our folk, our people. That as they were displaced from their home, that trauma resides in the DNA, and we pass that on. So you can imagine the trauma that these folks are experiencing. And Peter is simply trying to encourage them to keep holding on to the living hope. Keep your focus on the hope and not the displacement, not the persecution, although it's very difficult to do that. But he's reminding them that they still have a living hope, because if God can raise Jesus from the dead, and Dr. Miles Jones used to talk about resurrection as being life that should not be. It's life despite the attempts of negation of life and negation of being, that you're trying to wipe me out. You don't want my existence to be known in the earth, and yet I'm still here. And so what Peter is reminding them of is that they are still here. And every now and then we need to be reminded, regardless of the persecution we encounter, or the displacement, or the suffering, or the sickness. I talked about this yesterday. The setbacks. Listen, God uses all of that for our good. And the reality is that we are still here, and we can still hold on. We just hold on to God, and hold on to his unchanging, and hold on to God, because God, the God who promises, can bring it to pass. God has enough power. If he's able to raise Jesus from the dead, certainly. And one day he will raise us. One day we too will see him as he is. One day we will experience his glory in the fullness of his glory. And so he says to us this morning, he's been guiding us again to a living hope through the dead. Living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled. Here it is, y'all. Here's our part. This is the piece we give here, that does not fall away. Does not fall away. Does not fall away. It's not defiled. It cannot be touched by the persecution. Cannot be touched by the pain. Cannot be touched by the problems. Writer said in the scripture that this momentary and light affliction does not compare to the glory that is to come. It cannot be defiled. It is your inheritance, and it's incorruptible. It does not corrupt. Listen, here's the piece of whatever we gather here on earth, whatever we put away and put aside, can be corrupted. It can be defiled. It can be siphoned away. It can be stolen. But what God has promised for you and for I is incorruptible. It cannot be corrupted. It cannot be defiled. Here's the other part of it. It does not fade away. And look at what he says. It's reserved in heaven for you and for me. Whatever's reserved here can, Jesus talked about where your treasure is. That's where your heart is. He talks about how moth and rust can decay and destroy it. He says, but what you put in heaven, and that is the sense of what is reserved, that inheritance reserved for you in heaven is a promise that we can take to the bank. And it is something that cannot be touched, cannot be corrupted, cannot be defiled, will not fade away. Watch this. They are kept by the power of God through faith. Faith is so important. Faith is so critical. They are reserved in heaven. Reserved in heaven for you who are kept by the power of God. Watch this. Through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. Here it is. That God's power has kept us through faith for what is this? For salvation, for deliverance, for deliverance, both physical and spiritual. So what he's saying to us is this, that we can count on God, we can depend on God to deliver us, to set us free, both physically and spiritually. And again, the whole context is in relationship to our salvation. Suffering does not negate our salvation. It does not disqualify our salvation, nor does nor is our salvation rather tainted by our suffering. That's the point. That's the message he's trying to convey to you and I today. And so look at what he says as we kind of go back and recap. The Christian faith is described in verses 2 through 3. We go to the Christians are kept for God's glory. That's in verse 5. He talks about that. And then as he's getting to these verses 6 and 7, Christians are being prepared for glory. And that is where we are transitioning in these verses 6 through 7, that we are prepared for God's glory. Look at what it says. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various or by a multitude of trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. I want you to notice this sentence is a run on, just a bunch of commas, no period, it's just commas. As he's laying out that we are being prepared for a glory that is to come. And look at the first thing he tells us about this glory. He talks about these factors. He talks about trials, and he talks to us about these facts about our trials. He talks about these factors. He talks about what we can experience and expect as we go through these trials. Look at what he says to you and to I. The first thing he says, in this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be. It's really not a question of if, it's when. That's really what he's saying. When you face trials, even if for a short period of time, but it could be an extended period of time. But when you face trials, you have been grieved. He says you're going to be grieved by trials. If need be, you're going to, and what he's suggesting is that there are times when God allows these things in our lives to teach us some things. Here it is. There are some tools God uses and textbooks that God uses in our experience as Christians. And you know what those things are? You know what those tools are? You know what those textbooks are? They're trials. God uses trials, and he uses textbooks. He uses trouble. He uses these things to teach us something. And so he's teaching. The first thing he wants to teach us in these trials, and he doesn't use the word tribulation or persecution. I think that's very significant, because he's talking about general problems that Christians face as they are surrounded by unbelievers. And look at what he says. Watch what he says. He says trials can meet our needs. It can meet needs. That's what he says. He says this phrase, if need be, indicates that there are special times when God knows that we need to go through something. That sometimes trials discipline us when we have disobeyed God's will. But not only that, there are times that trials prepare us for spiritual growth. Or there are times when trials prevent us from sinning against God. And we don't always know the need that is being met. We don't always know what God is doing through the trial, and what God is, how he's using this trial. But best believe that God is using this trial for your good. And so we can trust God to know and to do, watch this, what is best for us. We say it this way: God knows what's best for us. And sometimes God uses these trials. Why? Because he's trying either to get something out of us, he's trying to correct us, he's trying to redirect us. Perhaps he's trying to grow us and to stretch us. As I mentioned yesterday in Lamentations, he's trying to stretch us and strengthen us. And there are times when God will use the trials of life to do just that, to teach us a lesson. And he uses them as lessons and as textbooks and as object lessons. They're illustrations, if you will, to help us to grow in our walk with him. So sometimes God will use, he says, if need be, if God needs to use it. Yeah, y'all gonna get it in a little bit. If God needs to use the trial, God will use the trial. God is sovereign, and that's part of God's sovereign strategy. God will use those moments to get out of you what God wants to get out of you. Watch this. He says, you have been grieved by various trials, multitude of trials, many trials. Trials come, trials go, but he calls them here various trials. And so we want to be mindful that God will use a multitude of trials to get out of us what he's trying to get out of us. Look at what he says, that the genuineness of your faith. Listen, y'all, I've said it before. These trials being varied literally means many colored. They're many colored. And so one day could be one thing, the next day could be another. But here's the piece: God has grace sufficient to meet our needs. That's the most important thing we must remember. The other thing we must remember is that the trials have come almost in a way of testing our faith. Um, it's only in those moments that we know where our faith lies and in whom our faith lies. If life were easy, that's why the trials are not easy. If life was just that easy, if the roads that we traveled were just that easy, we would never really have a need for faith. We would just live out of hope. And I'm hoping that tomorrow will be better than today. But faith says to me, even if it ain't, I'm still gonna trust God. I saw that earlier. Yeah, Reverend Jack. Even if it ain't, I'm still gonna I'm gonna depend on God. I'm still gonna put my hope and my faith and my trust in Him. I'm not hoping that things will be better. I'm putting my faith that even if it doesn't get better, that God got me. And that's what he's talking about here, the genuineness of your faith. Watch this. And he suggests to us this morning that our faith is more precious to God than gold. Our faith in him and what's possible with God and through God and in God is more important than even what we would consider the most precious of minerals and of jewels. It is more precious than gold. Watch this. That perishes. See. God is trying to get something out of us that is more more abiding. Um, Look at what he says again. Gold perishes, he says. That's what he says. And though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Right. So what he's suggesting is we need to be patient with ourselves. Can I say it that way? We got to be patient with ourselves, because what he's saying is that as we go through these trials, our faith is being tested, and our faith, and so we're proving the genuineness of our faith. That we really believe. Here it is. What we say we believe. We really believe in the God we say we believe in, and so our faith is being tested by these trials. But watch this: they will continue to be tested by these trials until Jesus returns. And the genuineness of our faith is not determined by how we handle necessarily moments now, but it's how we endure. Are we able to endure like good soldiers to the end, till Jesus comes back again? That's going to be the test. All of us have enough faith in moments to handle this trial or handle that trial, but can we over the span of our faith walk maintain that genuineness of faith? Can we until Jesus returns? And so here's the dilemma, that he has not returned yet, and we don't know when he's going to return. But the question is, when he does return, will we be found as those who are walking by faith and not by sight? Will we be found as those who remain faithful to the end? That's the question that Peter is raising for us today. And look at what he says. Just like gold is tested by fire and the impurities come out of it, and you wipe the dross off, but guess what? They don't throw the dross away. They use it. They use it for other pieces. For other precious metals. They use it for other things. They don't just throw the dross away. But watch this. The same thing with our faith, right? Our faith is being tested by fire. The trials, the fiery trials, the trials of fire is being tested. And what comes out of us prayerfully is the impurity. But watch this. I said this to the congregation yesterday. God doesn't waste anything. And so God would even use the dross. He'll use that which we think is useless to continue to build out our faith. Watch this. To the praise and honor and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Right? God will use even the dross of our lives for his glory and for his honor. And so I need us to get that. But here's the piece. Here's the piece. What comes out of it at the end is a genuine faith. Watch this. That has been tested by fire. Here's the other piece to this thing, y'all. This understanding that trials are not easy. As we experience grief or pain, it literally means trials produce heaviness. And so here's the piece, y'all. Here's the piece for us. We got to understand, y'all. Listen. I share it with anybody who will listen. Listen, there are times we have to learn how to sit in this stuff. Listen, y'all. Trials are not easy. And we're going to experience grief and we're going to experience pain. But watch this. To deny our trials and to deny that they are painful, to deny that they are hurtful, to try whatever you can to manipulate and get out of it as quick as you can, is to make it worse. Because we're going to have to keep going through the lesson until we learn the lesson. So why not learn the lesson the first time so you don't have to repeat the lesson? Because here's the lesson. Here's what we learn if we just go through it and we sit through it and we allow God to minister to us through it and send his ministering angels, and we maintain our faith through it, understanding that God is able to fix it and turn it around. God is able to make that way. If we just sit in it for a little while here, watch this. Whom having not seen you love, though now do not see him, yet believe, and you rejoice for joy inexpressible and full glory, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your soul. Here it is, all of it in a nutshell. Let me give it to you. You have been grieved by various trials, that the gems of your faith, being much more precious than the gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to the praise and glory, whom having not seen. Listen, let me remind us. I got to go back a little bit, but it's only for a little while, y'all. Trouble and trials don't last always. They don't. Various types will come, but that particular trial won't last always. That particular trouble won't last always. They come and they go. They ebb and they flow. But watch this, y'all. Watch this, y'all. It ought not to affect the fact that we are loved and we love God and Jesus in return. And watch this. We know that our trials are controlled by God. That God does not permit us to suffer 1 minute too long. God does not permit us to suffer. That's why he says a little while. We're tested by fire for a little while, to the praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen you love, though now you do not see him, yet believing you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Of this salvation the prophets have inquired and searched carefully, who prophesied of the grace that would come to you, searching what manner of time the Spirit of Christ who was in them was indicating when he testified before the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. To them it was revealed that not to themselves, but to us they were ministering the things which now have been reported to you through those who have preached the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things which angels desire to look into. Listen, he says to us in these concluding verses that we should rejoice in our suffering. Wow. And here's the point, y'all, I need us to see. I am not crazy enough to tell anybody that you should rejoice and be thankful for going through stuff. I'm not suggesting that. But I am suggesting that as we look ahead, as we look at what is to come, we should then rejoice. We know that God is going to bring us through this. We know God is going to keep us. He's going to preserve us through this particular trial. And so then my focus doesn't become the trial. My focus becomes on the triumph of looking ahead of what God has in store for me and for us. And so I'm looking ahead, but I'm doing it in faith because I'm in the middle of a trial. And so in faith, I'm looking ahead. I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking that God, this too shall pass. And I know that one day I'm going to receive and God's going to reveal the fullness of what all of this has meant. That all of this was for a reason and for a purpose. First Peter says for the salvation of our souls have to be cleansed, and the righteousness had to be removed, unrighteousness had to be removed, and the dross has to be removed. But all of it God uses for his glory and ultimately for our future glory and our future benefit. And it is through, again, this this revelation of what he's done for Christ, but not only the revelation of what he did for Jesus, but also it is in fulfillment of the promises of the prophets. And look at what he says it, right? He talks about the prophets of old, how they prophesied of this grace. And so we have very strong indication that what we are believing God for will come to pass. Why? Because he showed it to us in Jesus Christ, and we're going to experience the fulfillment of what he's promised through the prophets, and that is what we hold on to. We talk about holding on. Don't you hold on? We hold on to God's unchanging, but we also hold on to the promises. We hold on to what he's already done, and we hold on to what we believe he's going to do. We keep holding on because we believe that God is able to bring us to it and he's able to bring us through it. And we know that trials only come to make us strong. They come to strengthen our faith. They come to stretch us. They come to help us to navigate this life. Y'all, let me say it this way, that as the longer we live, the more life throws at us. And so we continue to trust and to believe and to hold on and to continue to lean and depend on him, because why? We have a future hope, and our faith in the midst of our trials is that we will experience that which we've hoped for. And so I went over my time on how I did. I missed it, but we got to cut it here. We're praying for, I think, the Thrower family in the passing, it looks like, of a brother. We certainly want to lift them in prayer. We send our heartfelt, Lord have mercy, condolences to that family. That family has been hit mighty hard this year, and so we're going to continue to lift her up in prayer. And I'm going to try to get her contact information. I'm speaking it out loud so that somebody can make sure I get her contact information, that we may reach out to her and to her family on today. But we are certainly praying for you. As to all of you, we want you to know that we love you. There's absolutely nothing that you can do about that. We want you to know, as always, that we're praying that the Lord will bless you and keep you, that the Lord will make his face shine upon you, be gracious unto you, that the Lord will lift his countenance upon each and every one of you and grant you his peace. God bless you. And if it be God's will, I hope to hear you on the call this evening at 6:30. But until then, or until tomorrow morning, be blessed, and may heaven continue to smile upon you.